Hi everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Molly. I'm a mum here in the UK of 2 children. My husband and I have a biological 4-year-old daughter, and last year, mid-pandemic, we brought home our gorgeous little boy through the UK adoption process. One of you got in touch to ask me to do this video today with my top tips for when you first bring your child or your children home. After introductions, the placement day and those first few weeks, maybe even months, can be crazy. When I look back now to those first few weeks of bringing my little boy home, it is just one massive blur. We were learning about him, we were learning about his behaviours, we were learning about what he likes, what he doesn't like. We were adjusting to have a second child. Our daughter was adjusting to have a brother. He was adjusting to having a sister and effectively a mum and dad who were strangers to him a couple of weeks before that. So I have come up with 5 or 6 tips. 5 or 6? 5? 5 tips that I really think helped and will help you going forward in the early days of placement. When you initially bring your child or your children home, you will most likely be encouraged by your adoption agency or your local authority to have some time as a family to yourself. If you think about this from a child's perspective, they don't really know who you are, especially if they're younger. They may not have established that you are mum or you are dad, and you have to let them have time to do that. So we were very much encouraged to live in a bubble, and this meant seeing nobody else, not introducing any family or any friends until we felt really confident that our little man could come to us knowing that we were mum, we were dad, or we were caregiver. We were there to meet his primary needs, nobody else. That is when we knew that we were ready to kind of venture out back into the world again. So being in a bubble itself can be really hard. I suppose it's like being in lockdown. We were in lockdown at the time, so we were kind of used to it anyway. We weren't actually allowed anybody in the house. We weren't allowed to go to anybody else's houses. So we were kind of forced into a bubble. But as lockdown lifts and people might be watching this video back, you might think, oh my goodness, literally seeing no one. Yeah, treat it like lockdown. That is exactly the purpose of it, so that your little one can start to feel safe and comfortable and get to know you without any other distractions. So my first tip is to keep your expectations realistic. You will have just done maybe a week to 2 weeks of introductions where you go and meet your child or your children. You will be mentally knackered, and that doesn't stop, because at the end of introductions you have your placement day, which is the day when you bring your child or children home. You will have said goodbye to foster carer, or if you're doing foster to adopt, you might be bringing them home from the hospital. You will be drained. Your child or children will also be drained, and then they have to adjust to a new environment. It is really easy to be excited and get really high hopes about the amazing times that you're going to have at home together straight away in those early days, but in reality, you're probably going to hit some bumps. In my experience, our little man had no idea where the heck he was. He'd done some visits to our house in introductions, but he was here 24/7. He was grieving his foster carer. He had been taken from his home, which was his foster home. And so he was put in this really uncomfortable place that he had no comforts. He didn't recognise the smells, he didn't recognise any of the rooms, and he only just spent 2 weeks getting to know us. Most of the time our son was pretty distracted. We'd done really intense introductions, so he did feel comfortable coming to us for cuddles, but it's just for you guys to make sure that you don't start fantasising about these amazing first few weeks home, and just to keep those expectations realistic. This will really help with things like post-adoption depression as well, which can stem from, you know, not meeting expectations, the pressures of moving home, the pressures of adjusting to a new child. It's really important that you do just speak to your social worker about some of the challenges that you might face with your little one and your little one's social worker as well, so that you go into these first few weeks knowing exactly what will probably happen. My second tip is to set boundaries with your support network. If your family and friends are like my family and friends, they just wanted to meet their newest addition to the family. They were so excited, calling us up, wanting to pop round, and we established very early on with them that this could not happen until we said yes and gave them the thumbs up. We explained why, and it is so important for your little one that they are not introduced to new people that could A, confuse them as to who is meant to be meeting their needs as their primary caregivers, and 2, they don't get scared. They've just had a humongous life change moving home with new parents, or a new parent if you're doing it by yourself, they're in a new environment, and then you're throwing in a boatload of people that they don't really know who they are and they're still trying to adjust to you. So set boundaries with your family and friends in a really gentle way, explain to them why it's important not to do this, and that actually in the end it will benefit their relationship with the child or the children, because when they've had the time to settle with you, they will then feel trustworthy enough to go and gravitate towards other people within your support network. My third tip, and one I cannot stress enough, is to plan. Oh my gosh, plan. Now, I'm not going to say that anything is going to go to plan, but having a plan and a routine in place for the first 2 weeks maybe will really, really help. We knew our son's routine from doing it at foster carers and introductions, and just from what his local authority had given us in kind of like a document. And so we could plan around this. We knew when he napped. We knew when we needed to eat. We planned a family activity. We planned bedtime routines. And we wrote this up, we stuck it on the wall, and we stuck to it religiously. One, because children who have experienced trauma, neglect and loss really benefit from strict routine. It helps them feel safe. Two, because we had a plan. We weren't just wandering around the house thinking, well, what do we do now? Is there anything that we need to do? What should we be doing? And three, it really does allow you to plan some quality family time. For us, this looked like maybe doing a bit of therapy activities, doing some craft activities, just playing in the garden as a family, but scheduling that time just to make sure it happens, and that with all the stress you may be experiencing, you've got something to focus on and work towards can really, really help. My fourth tip is that although you are in the early days of placement, please, please, please make sure that you have time for self-care. It is so important. And a lot of adopters think, oh, well, this is it, all guns blazing, we're going to have no time for self-care, we'll think about it later. No. Please do self-care. You, as well as your child, are undergoing a huge life change at this time. You've just welcomed home a new child, and you've probably had some challenges, or you're probably going to have some challenges, as well as some really lovely moments. It's important to reflect on both the good and the bad, and just make sure that you refocus and you reset yourself. If you haven't seen my video on the importance of self-care in the adoption process, or as an adopter, I'll link it below. Please watch it. If I have one tip for anybody thinking about adoption, it is to commit to self-care. But yes, make sure you have time for self-care. It can be when your little one naps, it can be when they sleep, and I know it's really tempting to go and pick up the hoover or go and do the dishes whilst they're asleep, but seriously, just having half an hour in the bath or on a run whilst your partner watches your little one while they sleep, or if you're a single adopter, work out in the garden, have a bath, read a book, read a magazine, have a FaceTime with your pals. Just make sure that you have that time for yourself so that you can stay on your game. As I said, part of self-care is reflection. Make sure that you're reflecting on the positives. It's so easy when you're having such huge changes in your life and there's maybe some challenges going on for all the negatives to consume you. Journal, write them down. Just write down the positive things that have happened that day, and you will soon realise that you're actually making much bigger steps than you think you are. And my final tip is very practical. Put meal prep. Oh my gosh, just meal prep. I did this and people thought I was insane. I meal prepped for all of introductions, and I meal prepped enough for the first 2 weeks at home. It was a lifesaver because I wasn't stood in the kitchen cooking, I wasn't away from the family. We had 2 kids, like we'd never had 2 kids before, and it was stressful. The house was a tip. The last thing I wanted to do was start going tearing things out the fridge and cooking a fresh meal. I pre-baked lasagnas, pies, curries, stews, anything you can just grab and defrost. Nice hearty family meals. Do it, because it saves you stress and it saves you time. And a top tip here is to make sure that you cook something that you know everybody will like. For your little ones that are maybe moving home, ask their foster carer, what's their favourite food? What is their favourite food? Because they'll eat it. It'll probably comfort them a little bit because it'll be a familiar taste and a familiar meal, and then you can hopefully have a very nice meal time together. I hope that those tips were helpful. They certainly helped me in those first few weeks, although they were absolute madness weeks and we had social workers coming in and out. We really did get a lot of time to bond as a family, and having some structure in place and just some plans in place to support us through that time really did make it much more enjoyable than challenging. If you do have any more questions about the content of this video or adoption related questions in general, you can either comment below or you can find me on Instagram at mollymamadopt. I'm happy to share more of my experience, but also subscribe to my channel for more adoption related content that I will be bringing out soon. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye!